Greetings all, Ferrariman601 here. Welcome to the live commentary stream for the 2018 Singapore Grand Prix. As usual, we have some storylines coming into this race, none the least of which, at least in my opinion, is the Ferrari cooling bag. Yes, what is it? Why did the FIA ban it? How come Ferrari spent at least $1 million designing a strange-looking device with all sorts of cooling chambers and discharge chutes and stuff to put on top of their camera so nobody can see whatever their steering wheel settings are on the grid? Yeah, that story, believe it or not, has absolutely captivated the Formula One universe for the last 2 weeks between the Italian and Singapore Grand Prix. Of course, we also have the somewhat inconsequential side story of Kimi Räikkönen leaving Ferrari and going to Sauber next year. Yes, that is the true story coming into this race. Kimi Räikkönen leaving Ferrari after returning there for the 2014 season there, partnering Fernando Alonso at the time, Sebastian Vettel coming in. However, Räikkönen going to Sauber. In his place, we are going to have Charles Leclerc. Yes, Leclerc is a Ferrari driver in 2019. That is an absolutely huge development. Obviously, that's a big deal in the life and career of the young Monegasque. However, it does represent a very large change of form for Ferrari, going for a driver in their lineup who will only have been in Formula One for one season by the time he joins the team. Absolutely crazy stuff, but Leclerc is definitely a true talent. He's going to be a world champion in the future, I would say. So Ferrari making an investment in their future in the form of Charles Leclerc. My friend and Bavette, good day to all of you. Thank you for joining. At this point, we still have about 20 minutes before the start of the formation lap. Taking a look at the Sky Sports World feed here via ESPN, Martin Brundle is interviewing a bunch of children on the front of the starting grid. That's somewhat confounding, but there it is. Liberty Media, what are you doing? At any rate, the starting grid for today's Singapore Grand Prix looks a little bit something like this. Lewis Hamilton is on pole position, starting from the front row, car number 44. His qualifying lap yesterday was something unreal. The amount of speed that Mercedes had was just mind-boggling. Yesterday's pole time was about 3.5 seconds faster than the 2017 pole time. Yes, the cars are 3.5 seconds a lap faster this year than they were just 1 year ago. Never mind 2016. That's incredible. Lewis Hamilton on pole. P2, Max Verstappen in the first of the Red Bull cars. He is followed in P3 by Sebastian Vettel in the first of the Ferraris. Ferrari, and specifically Sebastian, thought that they would have had the measure on Lewis Hamilton yesterday. However, Vettel just could not get a lap together when it counted. P4, the second Mercedes of Valtteri Bottas. He is followed in P5 by the second Ferrari of Kimi Räikkönen. P6 for Daniel Ricciardo. The two Red Bulls looked very good for most of qualifying, but again, when it really counted in Q3, Ricciardo just fell off the pace for Verstappen there on the front row, but Ricciardo only 6th for the Australian. P7 for Sergio Perez in the first of the Force India, as he's followed in P8 by the Haas of Romain Grosjean. P9, Esteban Ocon in the second of the Force India cars. Ocon definitely in the center of the driver market for 2019. At this point, it does not appear that the Frenchman has a job next season. P10 for Nico Hülkenberg in the first of the Renaults. He is followed in P11 by Fernando Alonso, who has managed to hoist the recalcitrant McLaren once again into Q2. P12 for Carlos Sainz in the second Renault. He's followed in 13th by Charles Leclerc, the new Ferrari man. P14, Marcus Ericsson in the second of the Saubers, right behind his teammate Leclerc. P15, Pierre Gasly in the Toro Rosso. P16, Kevin Magnussen in the second Haas. Remember, his teammate Grosjean is up in P8 Not a great qualifying for Magnussen. P17 for Brendan Hartley in Toro Rosso. We know that he's in hot water as well in terms of keeping his seat. P18, Stoffel van Dorn. We know that he is not keeping his seat at McLaren next year. Carlos Sainz going to McLaren instead. P19, Sergei Sirotkin in the first of the Williams cars. He is followed in P20 and last on the grid by Lance Stroll in the second Williams. Sim Racer Flight Sim 1000, Yona, Nathan, hello! Thank you for joining us today. Yes, of course, a first corner crash is definitely on the cards today. Last year, the 2017 installment of the Singapore Grand Prix saw Kimi Räikkönen, Max Verstappen, and Sebastian Vettel all come together before the first corner. It basically took both Ferraris out of the race, and, in my opinion, it ended the World Championship fight. A similar occurrence today would have similar consequences. We could see a 50-point swing in the Drivers' Championship, assuming that Sebastian Vettel scores no points, and that would basically seal the deal for the Drivers' Championship for yet another year. Constructors' title is always a bit more fluid just because the cars can each score points, but driver standings, if Vettel does not finish close to Hamilton on track, we're going to have some trouble today. Catching up with the world feed, Martin Brundle speaking with Kevin Magnussen. Again, the Dane starts 16th on the grid today. Wow, take a look at the world feed right now. Mercedes obviously sending cool air through their car. It appears to be carrying either nitrogen or carbon dioxide vapors in it at a low temperature as well, because you could just see as they're pumping the air through the car how it's exhausting through the radiator outlets on the side pods as well as up through the engine cover in the chimney there. Never seen that before. That was quite spectacular. And if you were ever really concerned with or interested by the airflow around a modern Formula One car, look no farther than that. Pretty sure Mercedes would not be happy with them showing that on the world feed, though. My friend, do I like Leclerc? Yes, I do. I think he's a fantastic talent. I think that he hasn't had enough time to prove himself in Formula One. Obviously, he did a great job in Formula 2 in 2017, but it's a little bit of a shot in the dark for Ferrari. Obviously, they like the kid, they know what he can do, but with every investment, there comes risk. Ferrari's making the investment. We know Leclerc is good, but at the same time, we don't necessarily know how good he is in Formula One. Yes, at a few times this year, he has definitely taken that Sauber far higher up the field than it deserves to be, and he's scored good points on several occasions, but it hasn't happened every weekend. So if Ferrari are looking for a rock-solid insurance policy, they don't have it. They are just putting a lot of trust in this guy. He is going to do a very good job. Once you put him in a good car, he's going to be competitive. He's going to be winning races, I have no doubt. but it is a very large departure in terms of Ferrari's managerial style. They tend not to go for rookie drivers, but Leclerc, for all intents and purposes, next year is still going to be a rookie. And Nathan, in terms of how do they make suspension adjustments, camber toe, things like that, well, they do it in a much similar fashion to how it would be done in pretty much any other car. Obviously, you're changing lengths of dampers, you're changing lengths of the push rods, for example, in the suspension. But because this is Formula One, I also would not be surprised if they have completely different suspension components for different camber settings, for example. If you want a little bit more lean in the wheels, you might have a slightly different length upper wishbone than you do lower wishbone. So, I mean, again, cost is no object in Formula One. I would not be surprised if they had arrangements like that where you'd have different components for different setups. But for the most part, they do have all of the same adjustments that you would have on your road car. Kevin Creighton, hello. Good to see you. Yes, Nathan, you're right. And to put it all in perspective, Ferrari spent at least $1 million in the last 2 weeks between Monza and Singapore designing this cooling pod to put on top of the FOM camera, just so that they can not cool the camera but block the view of the camera so the camera can't see the steering wheel settings on the grid. That's what I mean when I say that cost is no object in Formula One. This is a frivolous thing that can be solved by putting your thumb over the camera lens. But no, Ferrari has to come up with this intricate piece of equipment to block the camera view. That's how Formula One has always been. It's always been a display of extravagant excess, and once again, there it is. You know, of course, that's how Formula One also works. A lot of times teams will do something, they'll come up with some bit of theater on the grid or wherever it is. They'll cover up some component, or they'll all stand in front of something, whatever. And they're trying to put up a smoke screen, basically. They're trying to distract you with drawing your attention to one part of the car. They're trying to distract you from something completely different. For example, I think this was Lotus in the late 70s when they were playing with ground effect. I think when they would roll that car out into the pit lane, no matter what they were doing with it, they would always have the gearbox and differential covered up with a blanket. And people started to think, what are they doing with their gearbox? What are they doing with their differential? When in reality, they were just trying to distract you from the fact that the car had skirts down the sides and they had sealed the under tray and they created all this downforce with it. Taking a look at the world feed right now, you can see what I mean. That pod thing on top of the Ferrari, that is what everybody's been looking at, and it's blocking the view of the FOM camera on top of the car. Is that really the purpose of that device, or is that device doing anything for the performance of the car? Are they really just trying to draw our attention to that so we don't look at something else? Who knows? Sky Sports there just speaking with Zach Brown of McLaren, talking about hopefully there's no first corner incident, but if there is, he hopes both orange cars make it through. Also talking about Lando Norris being promoted to a race seat next year alongside Carlos Sainz. Of course, Fernando Alonso is leaving Formula One at the end of this year. All signs point to him racing here in the United States in IndyCar next year, but none of that has been confirmed at this point. McLaren, of course, would just love their fortunes to change. They would love to be fighting for wins and podiums, but it's not going to happen, folks. Yes, the concept designs that were released late last week, regarding potential 2021 designs for F1 cars, I think they've got the potential to look okay. Problem is, I'm not so sure of the performance. From what I could tell, they were cutting down topside aero by a big margin, maybe by as much as 50%. The wings that they had on the front and rear did not look very complex. They did not look like they were going to be funneling a lot of air through them at all. They basically looked like IndyCar oval wings, to put it bluntly, so they're not going to be generating a lot of downforce topside. Does that mean that they're opening the door for ground effect if they allow the teams to play with that design? It's possible. That car looks like it would be a good base for a ground effect car. If you have a flat under tray, then perhaps you can sculpt the under tray in an airfoil shape and you can generate a lot of downforce that way. That would also solve the problem of these guys not being able to follow closely nose to tail. But knowing the FIA, knowing how things either get ratified or don't get ratified in this sport, I'm not so optimistic about what those 2021 designs would be. I know they would be down on downforce, and that would slow them down significantly. We're talking about how this year's cars are already 3.5 seconds a lap faster than last year's cars around a lap at Singapore. 2021, I would think, relative to 2018, just sight unseen. Obviously, nobody's done any CFD figures on these, no wind tunnel testing, but I would say at most circuits, particularly at a very aero-dependent circuit like here, Singapore, I would say the 2021 concept, as it is right now, would be as much as 8 seconds per lap slower. Yes, Nathan, I agree. I don't understand why Formula One is going in the direction it is. It's not to cut costs, because these power units are the most expensive engines ever produced for any series anywhere. And, well, we were just complaining about Ferrari making this ridiculous thing to cover up the camera. That doesn't come from nothing. Somebody's got to be writing those checks. And if they were really concerned about cost cutting, that stuff wouldn't happen. So it's not cost cutting. I don't know why they have made the cars ugly. I don't know why they've made the cars so heavy. Some of it has to do with safety, but not all of it. And I really don't know why we've got hybrid systems. I don't know why everybody's got this big preoccupation or obsession with talking about how Formula One could go electric. Like, what's the point here? It doesn't feel like development in a racing series to me. It feels like political pandering. And I don't watch racing for politics. That's for other times. I miss the cars that looked great and sounded absolutely spectacular. I would deal with it if Formula One cars were 10 seconds a lap slower, but they still had the V10 engines, because they would sound like a Formula One car. At this point, they're really fast. Lewis Hamilton's pole position yesterday, unreal. Those kinds of speeds are barely comprehensible, but the car sounds like a vacuum cleaner with a bad motor bearing. Like, you know, you have the speed, but you don't have the spectacle, and that's what's going on with Formula One. That's why I think their fan base is going to start dropping off, especially when IndyCar gets their act together and they're going to have 980 horsepower, just like the old kart days. It's going to be giving them a run for their money. Sim Racer Flight Sim 1000. Have I been keeping track of Sim Racing Expo? No, I've not. In fact, I didn't even know that there was anything going on. Yes, Nathan. The SF15T, the 2015 Ferrari, not only does it not give you any good feedback, but it is just an awful car. The chassis is terrible, the tires are terrible, the suspension's terrible. It gives you absolutely no confidence at all. The F2004 had a ton of downforce, ton of horsepower, good tires, even though they were groove tires. They were actually made for the car and for that car only, unlike 2015 where Pirelli just made, oh yeah, here, use this. And we all know what happened with Pirelli tires in 2015. But that's actually pretty indicative of what these cars were like up and down the field in 2015. No downforce, all straight line speed, but you can't use the power out of the corners because the tires are bicycle tires for the most part. They're so tiny. 2017, the rule changes there did address most of those concerns. More downforce, bigger tires. They slackened off the rules a little bit in terms of what they could do with the MGU systems, gave us a bit more horsepower as well, and obviously the lap times fell. We're still within that set of regulations now in 2018. Obviously, the only big difference visually on the cars between last year and this year is halo, but for the most part, the aero philosophy is still the same. 2019, cars are going to be slower again, chopping up the front and rear wings there. Who knows what's going to happen? Again, I know I've said it before, and I'll say it again. Formula One gets a good thing going, and then they ruin it because they simply want to ruin it. Nobody asked for slower cars next year, but that's what we're getting. Jack Barlow, that question for you. Nobody really knows how much power one of these engines would make completely by itself, or the people who do know are not divulging it. I would say, conservatively, the V6 engine, just by itself, with no turbo and no hybrid systems, is probably only developing about 500 horsepower. It's when you start throwing in the turbocharger and the high boost pressures. Mercedes, for example, they might be running a boost pressure of up to 6 bar. Nobody really knows how much boost these guys are running, but they could be. So you add in 5-6 bar boost pressure, that's another 400 to 500 horsepower. And then you get the hybrid system in there, which is another 160-ish horsepower. Yes, I don't think it's untoward to say that the Mercedes might have 1,100 horsepower this year. It's a big number. And again, just look at that qualifying lap from Hamilton yesterday. Down the straights is where he's making up most of his time relative to Vettel last year. At any rate, the lights at the front of the field have gone green. The formation lap is now underway. Martin Brundle there, bringing up a very good and relevant statistic. There has been a safety car here in Singapore every single time that we have visited. Of course, this is the 10th Singapore Grand Prix. Singapore first hosted a Formula One race back in 2008. That race was not without controversy. It was eventually won by Fernando Alonso after his then teammate Nelson Piquet Jr. crashed intentionally, bringing out the aforementioned safety car and securing Fernando a win on strategy. Felipe Massa or Kimi Räikkönen really should have won that race and kept the World Championship fight going, perhaps giving it to Felipe Massa and Ferrari, but they bungled a pit stop for Felipe Massa. The Brazilian departed the pit box with the fuel rig still attached. That was the end of Massa's day. Perhaps we'll see a slightly less eventful race today, or perhaps we'll see one that's even more crazy than that. I hope for the latter. On board with Sebastian Vettel, he's just trying to put some energy into the front axle there, bringing the tire temperatures up as much as he reasonably can. Lewis Hamilton just coming into the final complex of corners now, leading the field through. Hamilton now just approaching the final corner very slowly. Again, he's trying to take care of his tires. He doesn't want to put too much heat into everything because he will now be sitting at the front of the grid for about 45 seconds as he waits for everybody else to assemble. The front two rows have made it to the grid. They're just going through their burnout sequences to get the clutch bite point set up as well as to get the last bits of temperature into the rear axle. Hamilton and Verstappen have now stopped on the front row in their respective starting positions. The rest of the field is lining up behind them. So watching the McLaren of Van Dorn and the two Williams cars of Sirotkin and Stroll just forming up on the back of the field. The medical car is in position, and here come the lights for the 2018 Singapore Grand Prix. Watch turn 1. Lights out, and we are away. Lewis Hamilton making an absolutely blistering start. Sebastian Vettel as well as we go around the outside of the Red Bull into turn 1. Vettel thinking better of it. We do have some lockups there in the back. I can't see if everybody has made it through turn 1, but it is Hamilton leading Verstappen from Vettel, and we have a Force India off into the wall already. I believe that is Esteban Ocon in the Force India. Yellow flags are out. Indeed, it was Esteban Ocon in that Force India. Meanwhile, Sebastian Vettel overtaking Max Verstappen. Will the Dutchman yield? Yes, he's going to have to yield there. And safety car deployed. Another opportunistic move by Sebastian Vettel to make an overtake, which could turn out to be critical later on before the safety car comes out. We saw him do this in Belgium, and he won that race. The order under safety car now on lap 1 of 61 is Hamilton, Vettel, Verstappen, Bottas, Raikkonen, Ricciardo, Perez, Grosjean, Alonso, and Sainz, your top 10. Out of the race thus far appears to be Esteban Ocon. On board in replay with Ocon here. He gets together with his teammates. Yes, Sergio Perez just punted him ever so gently, but that was enough to get that Force India to stuff its right side into the concrete barriers. That's the golden rule of motorsport. Don't take your teammate out. And unfortunately, clearly this was not an intentional move on the part of Perez, but he got together with the other pink and white car, and, well, it turned up snake eyes. Ocon there just climbing through a gap in the fence to get himself out of harm's way. Now it'll be up to the marshals to retrieve that very damaged Force India. Critically, though, in terms of Sebastian Vettel's race, he has already overtaken Max Verstappen. He did that move fair and square before the safety car was deployed. Now he only has Lewis Hamilton in front, and then he'll be leading this Grand Prix. Of course, the Mercedes is a very fast car around here, as we saw yesterday. Therefore, it may not be an academic cut-and-dry affair for Sebastian Vettel to make it around the Mercedes of Hamilton. But he is now in the best possible position to do so. This is going to take a little while to get this Force India out from where it is. He did not happen to crash by a gap in the fence, so there are no cranes in that area. There are no marshals stationed right there, so this is going to take a few laps to get a tractor, if not a flatbed truck out there and get that Force India out of harm's way. Replay of the start. Lewis Hamilton and Sebastian Vettel both getting very good starts. Vettel got a better start than Max Verstappen for sure. He was alongside the Dutchman into turn 1. However, he thought better of trying to force the issue. Verstappen had the inside line. The corner was his anyway. The rest of the field going through turn 1, it was clean. I did not see any major contact there, but it was coming out of turn 2 where Perez and Ocon got together, and Ocon was, of course, the beneficiary of the wall. On board with Sebastian Vettel in replay of the start. Again, just being cautious, giving Verstappen the space there. He knows that he can make that overtake later on, and indeed he did going into turn 3, I believe that was. No, I beg your pardon, that was turn 4. In slow motion replay there. Vettel on Verstappen. Gets a great run. Ducks out of the slipstream and just uses the Ferrari horsepower. And what's really cool is because we're running at night, we can read the steering wheel displays quite nicely. You can actually see that by that point, Vettel had expended about 50% of his MGU battery for that lap. Very cool. On board with Fernando Alonso through turn 1. His race has already gone 100% longer than it had gone last year. The Force Indias get together right in front of him. Fernando picks up a little bit of debris from the car of Ocon, but there appears to be no damage. There we go. There's the tractor getting that Force India out of there. Again, we'll still have another couple of laps behind safety car just so we could make sure that we could get this car and that tractor out of harm's way. Working lap 3 of 61 behind the safety car. The order is Hamilton from Vettel, from Verstappen, Bottas, Raikkonen, Ricciardo, Perez, Grosjean, Alonso, and Sainz, your top 10. The only car out of this race at this time, Esteban Ocon, who stuffed it into the barrier courtesy of his teammate getting into the side of him. World Feed just picking up the Williams of Sergei Sirotkin. We need a clearer view of it, but yes, look at this. We have damage there, or we have debris pickup of some kind on the right front cascade element of the wing of Sergei Sirotkin. It appears to be some sort of stiffener ring from around the tire bead, where the tire and the aluminum wheel or the magnesium wheel interface with each other, so you can mount the tire. It's a perfectly circular bit of equipment there that is stuck on the front wing of Sergei Sirotkin. Obviously, we're going to need him to pit in order to rectify that. Here we go. Here is some close-up slow motion of what's going on with that Williams of Sirotkin. That is absolutely bizarre. I don't know how that bit of debris would have worked its way into the cascade element there, but it is looped around it. And the particular part of the wing that it is looped around does not face the airstream head on. It's basically pivoted at 90 degrees, so this thing would have had to come in from the side and then snag itself on the front wing just perfectly. And evidently it has. I wonder if they'll make Williams pit to remove that. Surely they'll be seeing that with their aero data. Meanwhile, Ocon speaking to Sky Sports. And there we go. Williams in the pit lane. They have removed that piece of whatever it was. One of the mechanics holding on to it. It does look to be part of a wheel to me. Looks to be about 13 inches in diameter, which happens to be the diameter of these wheels. The word from race control, safety car in this lap, working lap 4 of 61. Still under safety car conditions. Max Verstappen is already cursing at something. I couldn't quite pick up that transmission there. But safety car will be coming in. Lewis Hamilton leads Sebastian Vettel, who leads Max Verstappen, just waiting for the lights to go out on the safety car. And then Lewis Hamilton will become the de facto safety car until we cross start-finish. Turn 3 incident involving Perez and Ocon, no further action. That's the official word from race control. All right, Sebastian, don't have any flashbacks to Baku last year. Just keep your distance from the Mercedes, but don't get too distant because he will want to rocket off into the distance. It's coming in to close the lap now. Lewis Hamilton can drop the hammer whenever he so chooses. And we're just waiting for Hamilton to make that decision. What he'll be doing is he'll be waiting for the safety car to cross into the pit lane. And I do believe Hamilton has decided that this is the moment, and indeed it is. Green flags are up. Lewis Hamilton has released himself. Sebastian Vettel in hot pursuit of the Mercedes, followed immediately by Max Verstappen as we resume the 2018 Singapore Grand Prix, working lap 5 of 61. Taking a look at Marcus Ericsson, thinking of a little bit of a look there at Charles Leclerc. He thinks better of it. Everybody coming back up to temperature now in terms of brake and tire temps. Lewis Hamilton already leading Sebastian Vettel by 1.067. The Ferrari at this point unable to keep up with the Mercedes there. As long as Vettel can keep in touch with the Mercedes, they can put some pressure on them in terms of the pit stop strategy. But for the moment, the Mercedes does have more raw pace than the Ferrari. Of course, once we start to get some proper laps run, timing and scoring will shake itself out, and we can start to compare sector times. At the moment, I would say the times are not quite reliable yet. On board the nose of the Ferrari SF71H of Kimi Räikkönen as we're running through Sector 2 of this lap. And already Lewis Hamilton has extended his lead over Sebastian Vettel. It is now 1.376 according to live timing and scoring. For what it's worth, fastest lap, Lewis Hamilton, 148.052. Fastest of all in Sector 1 at a 28.716. Sebastian Vettel last time by 148.305. The gap was 1.111 at the line. Again, we'll have to wait another couple of laps to get truly representative times. Hesitated I. Afternoon for you, morning for me. Good morning, noon. Looking at the comparative sector times between Lewis Hamilton and Sebastian Vettel, Vettel was about a tenth and a quarter faster than Hamilton through Sector 3 on the previous lap. However, Hamilton is faster everywhere else. Sebastian Vettel, more importantly, is going to have to worry about Max Verstappen, who is gaining by leaps and bounds on the Ferrari relative to the Ferrari on the Mercedes. Verstappen much closer to Vettel than Vettel is to Hamilton at this stage. The gap between those two gentlemen is only 0.4. The gap between Hamilton and Vettel at this point, over 1 second. On board with the Dutchman as he pursues the German in the Ferrari. Let's see, what kind of drive does Verstappen have out of the corners and down the straights? He was complaining about the engine yesterday. Red Bull radio to Verstappen just telling him, so, you know what to do on the tires. Well, I'd imagine he has to drive fast on these tires, considering they are the Hypersoft, the softest available compound in all of Formula 1. DRS enabled from race control, working lap 7 of 61. The gap between Hamilton and Vettel has come down to just over 1 second now, 1.024. Max Verstappen with DRS on Sebastian Vettel. Sebastian Vettel with DRS on Lewis Hamilton. No position changes in the top 6. Danny Ricciardo still holding 6th. There's Perez in 7th, Grosjean in 8th, Alonso 9th, and Sainz in 10th. Again, the only car out of this race at this time is the Force India of Esteban Ocon. Max Verstappen definitely looking racy. He wants that second place back. Again, he started this race ahead of Sebastian Vettel. Vettel just made an opportunistic overtake right before the safety car came out. Completely legal and good thinking. However, Verstappen is going to want to undo that little mistake on his part, and he definitely has the opportunity to do so. He is, however, on the same tires as Sebastian. We don't know what the strategies are for these guys, but we can assume that the Ferrari and the Red Bull will be pitting at around the same time, given that they are on the same tires. Lewis Hamilton, meanwhile, who knows? That Mercedes seems to be able to do miraculous things with its tires. We saw Valtteri Bottas at Monza 2 weeks ago, able to wait so long to make his first pit stop. We'll see what Hamilton does. The gap at the front, working lap 8 of 61, it has remained stable. 1.1 seconds is now the gap between Hamilton and Vettel. The gap between Vettel and Verstappen is just over 1 second as well, 1.052 last time by per timing and scoring, which tends to be a little bit laggy. Lap times here. Lewis Hamilton last time by 147.519. Sebastian Vettel last time by 147.397. Fastest lap of the race so far. Current lap times that they are running, and Martin Brundle just pointed this out, these lap times are 11 seconds slower than we saw yesterday. They're 11 seconds off of pole position time. That's the difference between carrying a full tank of fuel and turning the engine down to protect it versus running light on fuel and turning the engine up to higher than it's really supposed to go. Fastest lap now goes back to Lewis Hamilton, 146.746. Vettel last time by 147.252. The gap is 1.4 seconds. Just taking a look into the Mercedes garage at the moment. Everything looks under control. The gap between Hamilton and Vettel's come down a little bit to just .990. That would put Vettel in DRS range in the DRS zone, provided that the gap does not change too much in the positive direction. According to FOM, .963 is the gap coming through Sector 3 at this point. On board the nose of Sebastian Vettel, still in pursuit of Hamilton. Just taking a look at how the wing is deflecting over the bumps, and then of course at higher speeds what it's doing under aero load. Of course, following so closely behind another car at a circuit like this, lots of turbulence to deal with, and sometimes from those onboard shots we can just see how the wing is vibrating around. You can sort of start to visualize where the turbulent factors are. Verstappen radio. Verstappen not happy with where his car is right now, but Red Bull saying, yep, it's a long race, we can get it figured out. It is a very long race. Here we're only working lap 10 of 61 scheduled. Adrian Newey, the Red Bull design genius, looking on the pit wall. He always looks like he's thinking about more creative and more ridiculous ways to manipulate air. Because, of course, that's what his job is. World Feed now picking up Hamilton and Vettel once again. Gap is still just around 1 second. Last time by start-finish, the gap was 1.244. It has since dropped a little bit. Seems like Vettel's content to hang out within about 1 second behind Hamilton at this point. At this point, we're not really seeing much action going on track. The pit window theoretically is starting to open up. The most of the field running on the Hypersoft tires, everybody from P1 to P8, and then P11, 12, Hulkenberg and Gasly. Hartley also on the Hypersoft, and Ocon was on the Hypersoft before he had his accident. The Hypersoft runners could well be stopping in the next couple of laps, but then again, I'm just looking at the onboard shots, and these tires don't look to be in such bad condition, at least not here on the Red Bull of Max Verstappen. Who knows how long they might be able to squeak it out on the Hypersofts. Lewis Hamilton getting on the radio saying something about the tires. I wasn't quite able to pick up what he said, but the pace of this race is going so slowly, and again, Brundle makes a good point here. The pace of this race is so slow that Hamilton, even though he is not really pulling away from his rivals, he's also managing to protect his car and protect his tires, thus pushing back further and further the time at which he absolutely must come into the pits for a new set of tires. So it's a double-edged sword, but for the moment, as long as he can keep people behind him, it's going to work out because everybody else behind is also going to have to stop at some point. Michael Vincent, hello. Thank you for joining us here today. According to Ferrari, they just told Sebastian Vettel that Hamilton reported that there's not much left with his tires. However, Sebastian Vettel retorts to the Ferrari mechanics saying, I don't believe him. I also don't believe Hamilton if that really is what he was claiming, because I'm just looking at everybody's tires. Remember, track temperatures are quite low here because we're not in sunlight, so the tires are not going to have those sorts of stresses going through them. At the same time, we really don't have too many high-speed corners around this circuit, so tire temperatures are really going to be under control. And it's really that lateral grip that wears a tire out. So we don't have that so much around here. I think these Hypersofts are still going to be in good condition, and just looking at the tires of the front runners, they don't look particularly worn at all. Meanwhile, Lewis Hamilton resets fastest lap 145.502, fastest of all in sectors 2 and 3. Sebastian Vettel last time by 146.104. So Hamilton is about 0.6 a lap faster than Vettel at this point. The gap at the line was 1.789. What's really interesting to me about this is as Hamilton starts to go fastest of all in sectors 1 and 2 yet again on this lap, what's interesting to me is just how Mercedes and how Hamilton have the pace of this race completely under their finger. They can speed up whenever they want, they can slow down whenever they want, and the rest of the field basically is obliged to just fall in line behind them because overtaking around here is just pretty much impossible. They know exactly what they've got, they know exactly the tire wear delta that they need, and they're able to achieve it easily. Once again, Lewis Hamilton fastest lap 144.929, fastest of all in sectors 1 and 2. Vettel last time by 145.352. Vettel has picked up the pace in response to Hamilton, but it is not good enough at this point. Again, that's not to say that Vettel's not playing a strategy of his own, but at this point, Hamilton is pulling away at the rate of about 1.5 seconds per lap. A bigger development, though, is that Vettel has pulled away quite significantly from Max Verstappen. The gap between positions 2 and 3 is now 2.3 seconds. George Russell there looking on in the Mercedes garage. Of course, George Russell in the thick of the Formula 2 championship fight. Hamilton continues to pull away from Vettel. The gap is now 3.022, according to FOM timing and scoring on the screen. Fastest lap, Lewis Hamilton, 144.403. Sebastian Vettel has just taken to the pit lane, according to timing and scoring. Waiting to see that on our screens. Indeed, Ferrari in the pit lane, and there is Sebastian Vettel. Lap 15 of 61. Vettel the first to blink. They go on to a set of the ultra soft tires, so a step up in terms of hardness. Pit stop looked good. No issues there on the stop that I could see from Ferrari. Vettel just having to crawl down the pit lane at 60 kilometers an hour. Vettel exiting the pit lane now, looks like he's going to rejoin in P7, and indeed he does. I don't know why Ferrari have pitted so early. Their tires did not look to be worn out at all, especially considering that Sebastian Vettel saying that he didn't believe Lewis Hamilton would be having tire issues either. However, Ferrari first to blink. Vettel radio. Ferrari just telling Vettel now, give it everything you have. Is this trying to get Vettel out of sequence so that they could maybe capitalize on a safety car should one happen again? Perhaps Vettel could go deeper on this stint than anybody else? Who knows? Mercedes now reacting into the pit lane for Mercedes. Hamilton radio, box, box, box. Mercedes have a set of soft compound tires, and Lewis Hamilton now ducking into the pit lane. Hamilton stopping here at the end of lap 15. The Ferrari and the Mercedes are on the same strategy. Mercedes confirmed on the soft compound tire. Vettel is on the ultra soft tire. Vettel's going to have to stop one more time. Hamilton may well be good to go to the end already, working lap 16 of 61. If that is the case, that is a race over. Lewis Hamilton comes out ahead of Sebastian Vettel regardless. Hamilton rejoins in P5, Vettel in P7, stuck behind the Force India of Sergio Perez. Sebastian Vettel all the while losing time now, stuck behind the sole remaining Force India in this field. Of course, this is technically a fight for position. Perez is completely entitled to defend his position as much as he wants. However, that does mean that Lewis Hamilton is going to be able to scamper off into the distance. If Vettel cannot bring the fight to Hamilton, that means Ferrari's strategy is completely blown and Mercedes could take it easy and just nurse those tires to the end of the Grand Prix. Ferrari in the pit lane once again. Is this for Raikkonen, or are they disbanding already? There did not appear to be so much of a sense of urgency to that stop. Valtteri Bottas, meanwhile, has visited the pit lane, and it looks like he has left the pit lane again. He is also on the soft compound tires. Meanwhile, Sebastian Vettel making it past Sergio Perez up into P5. Now Vettel can get after Lewis Hamilton. The gap between those guys right now, though, again, we'll have to wait for timing and scoring to shake out. Gap is around 4.5 seconds. Red Bull coming out into the pit lane now for race leader Max Verstappen. Of course, he is not leading the race on aggregate. That honor goes back, of course, to Lewis Hamilton, who is currently in 4th. Verstappen in the pit lane. See what tires go onto the Red Bull. Soft. So, and perhaps another potential one-stop strategy now for Max Verstappen. That stop looked a bit harried there. Did we get all 4 wheels on? Yes, we did, I suppose. Just the way the camera was jumping around made me suspicious of the right front, but everything does appear to be okay. Lewis Hamilton moves up into P3. Sebastian Vettel, come on, Vettel, you've got to get around Verstappen. You've got to get around the Red Bull. He does not get around the Red Bull. Verstappen gets out ahead of Sebastian Vettel. Vettel, that is your race done unless you can get around the Red Bull right now. Vettel is fighting understeer, believe it or not, coming into turn 3. He does not have the car underneath him. Once again, Ferrari not giving Sebastian what he needs when he needs it. Lewis Hamilton is just going to be able to pull away now. Sebastian Vettel just dropping back now from behind Max Verstappen. The gap has already grown to about, that can't possibly be right, but it is. The gap is about 5.2 seconds. Lap 18 of 61 of the Singapore Grand Prix. Sebastian Vettel's chances of a win have evaporated. That is my verdict. Meanwhile, Kimi Räikkönen leading the race now on the pit stop rotation. He is also on the Hypersoft tires. His lap time still reasonably competitive. Last time by for Räikkönen, 146.196. Ricciardo last time by on the same tires, 145.720 rather. How do Räikkönen's tires look? Been in shadow for most of this sequence that we've been following him, but yeah, they look fine. I don't think Kimi needs to make a pit stop anytime soon. He probably will make one soon, but in terms of what the tires look like, they look fine to me. I'm not seeing any big blisters on the fronts or rears now on board with Sebastian Vettel on the Ultra Softs. His tires obviously a lot newer than Räikkönen's. Vettel radio saying there is no chance, we were too late, and these tires will not make it to the end. So Sebastian Vettel on lap 19 of the Singapore Grand Prix has given up. Yes, definitely the most important development of this race so far. Charles Leclerc up into the points now in P10, 42 seconds behind race leader Räikkönen. Yes, and this does expose the underlying fault in Formula One. We are 20 laps into a 61-lap race. We are running laps in the minute 45, minute 46 range right now, so we still have well over an hour remaining in this race, and we already know the result. I don't really see the intrigue in this anymore. Norman Robinson, greetings to the Bermuda Islands. How are you today? Meanwhile, following Kimi Räikkönen, running on those Hypersofts, he's now on his 23rd lap, counting the reconnaissance and formation lap, lap 21 of the race. Räikkönen's tires seem absolutely fine. Ferrari, why did you pit Sebastian so early? Aiden Millward, hello! Yes, how do Ferrari keep messing it up? I don't know at this point, but it's quite evident that whoever is making the ultimate strategy calls at Ferrari is utterly incompetent, because they don't do anything that makes sense, particularly with Sebastian. Raikkonen's leading the race right now by 2.5 seconds over Ricciardo. Raikkonen's on the same tires that Sebastian started with, and they're still fine. Vettel pitted... how many laps ago already? He pitted 6 laps ago already, and he has now dropped back into P5. He was running in P3 off the start, so Ferrari on aggregate have lost Sebastian 2 positions. Meanwhile, Raikkonen's leading the race. Come on! Ferrari radio to Räikkönen, just asking how the car is, how the tire is. He's like, yeah, the tires are okay right now, but they might go at any time. One wonders if they might use Kimi as Mercedes used Bottas last time out at Monza. Could Räikkönen back up Hamilton and Verstappen, trying to close the gap for Sebastian Vettel, make the overtakes that he has to do a little bit easier? Or might they put Kimi out there to basically fight for the win? Who knows? At this point, Räikkönen could not make a pit stop and resume ahead of Lewis Hamilton. He is 12 seconds up the road from the Englishman at this point. If Räikkönen were to stop now, he would rejoin most likely in P7, potentially P6, depending on what happens to that gap to Valtteri Bottas. Ferrari in the pits for Räikkönen. Räikkönen making his first pit stop. Which tires are they putting on? Softs. Yellow sidewalled soft tires. Räikkönen should be good to go to the end of the race. Where does he resume? Vettel gets past Räikkönen now into P4. Verstappen, of course, has already made it by. Bottas has made it by. Räikkönen resuming in P6. But that strategy with Räikkönen proves that there was no reason for Ferrari to pit Vettel when they did. Obviously, those tires were capable of lasting for at least 23 laps. Vettel pitted 10 laps ago. Kevin Creighton, I definitely agree with that. I would love to see Kimi win one more race before he leaves Ferrari. That's not to say that it couldn't happen at Sauber, but it's not very likely. So I would love to see Kimi take at least one more win before the end of this year. It's possible, not so likely at the moment, but who knows what could happen. Yes, Jonathan Straitman, it's difficult to conceive, but yes, they are going to go the rest of this race with no more pit stops. Of course, anybody still running on the Ultra Softs, for example, like Sebastian, most likely they're going to have to stop again. But anybody on the soft compound tires, they're probably good to go. It's amazing to consider, but they're going to go well over half race distance on the same set of tires. Meanwhile, World Feed finally finding us some action. Pierre Gasly in P9, Charles Leclerc in P10. Leclerc is gaining big time on Gasly in front. Are we going to see some sort of action here? It's quite possible. Leclerc taking a look at Gasly there, thinks better of it. Of course, even these fights in the midfield, they might not look so consequential to us, but for these midfield teams, any results that they get are very important. Any points that they score are worth millions of dollars at the end of the season in terms of prize money. Therefore, they are going to be trying their best to keep things clean, but to go up the field as much as possible. That last camera shot there that we saw of the night sky did appear to have some water on it, but that's not to say that the water came from the sky in terms of rain. It could be any number of sources around here. Of course, it is always very humid here. We are in Singapore. We're rather close to the equator, and of course, we also have air conditioners, things like that, misters that are just shooting water into the air to keep the fans cool, so who knows where that water came from. There does not appear to be any threat of rain for the duration of this race. I say that, and then we see some more camera shots here that appears to show water falling down from somewhere. Is it starting to spit with rain here at Singapore? Watching Gasly and Leclerc now, both running on the the Ultra Soft tires, and let's see, I'm not seeing any spots of rain with the onboard cameras here. Of course, if we were getting appreciable rainfall, these slick tires would start falling off in terms of their performance very quickly. Some spots of rain there, perhaps on the top left of this picture on board with Leclerc, but nothing consistent. Intriguing to say the least, but at this point inconclusive. Again, I just don't see rain happening around here, but finding little spots of water on different camera shots now all of a sudden appears to be a thing. Sauber pit wall there, just sticking their hands out to see if they can feel any rain. Drivers are not talking about it. I have to believe we're seeing some sort of weird visual anomaly. Christian Horner on the Red Bull garage also looking at the sky. Daniel Ricciardo on the radio saying there's a little rain around the track. Red Bull saying just expecting some drizzle, no heavy rain. I'm still really not seeing much of anything out here. Again, it's hard to say because it's nighttime and we just don't have the typical visual cues you'd expect in terms of being able to see the clouds coming in and able to see the curtains of rain coming down in the distance as well. We just don't have that luxury because it's nighttime. But again, everything looks okay around the circuit. Meanwhile, Pierre Gasly and Charles Leclerc are going at it hammer and tongs here. Leclerc wants P9. Gasly currently has it. Gasly, big lockup. Leclerc now with better drive out of the corner, coming down along straight here. Charles Leclerc makes easy work there of Pierre Gasly. Nice move by the young Monegasque and by next year's Ferrari driver. Just that last camera shot there following Gasly and Leclerc. Did anybody happen to see the grandstand there? I saw a lot of people who appeared to be leaving. Pierre Gasly now coming into the pits. So far we're not seeing his pit stop on the world feed. Into the pits now comes Daniel Ricciardo from the race lead on aggregate. Lewis Hamilton will now reassume his position at the front of the field. He will be followed by Max Verstappen and Sebastian Vettel. Ricciardo now out on the ultra soft tires. After Ricciardo's pit stop, the order resumes basically what it was at the start of the race. Hamilton from Verstappen, from Vettel, Bottas, Raikkonen. Ricciardo resumes in P6. Alonso, Sainz, Leclerc in P9, and Ericsson in P10. Both of the Saubers currently in the points. Working lap 30 of 61. The order is unchanged at the front. Hamilton from Verstappen from Vettel, your top three. We are just about at half distance now. We are 56 minutes, 20 seconds into the race, time-wise. We will just perhaps squeak in under the 2-hour limit. Again, that depends on what the ultimate pace is going to be. This race here on the east coast of the United States was 1 hour earlier than most of the races tend to be. This one started at 10 past 8 my time. Usually these races start at 10 past 9. Not worried about the time change. I'm usually awake anyway by this point, but suffices to say that perhaps this is not the most interesting thing I could have done this morning. Yes, the camera is definitely much more intrigued by watching Sergei Sirotkin about to go a lap down relative to Sergio Perez in P10. So Sirotkin has already been lapped by cars in positions 1 to 9. He's about to go a lap down relative to P10. Radio. Williams just telling their Russian guy that he's doing a great job. And undoubtedly all of the money that's coming in with every turn of that steering wheel, of course they're going to tell him he's doing a great job. Now, I beg your pardon on that. I was looking at the wrong graphic. This is a fight for position. Sirotkin is in P13. Perez is in P14. That would explain why I was confused as to why there were no blue flags. Williams legitimately in front of a Force India. That can't possibly be correct. Force India must have a problem of some sort. Sirotkin still holding Perez behind. Again, this is a fight for position. I was completely caught by surprise by that. Somehow, a Force India is legitimately behind both of the Williams cars. Lance Stroll running in P12. Yes, Fernando Alonso, he's running dead last, and he's not going to get any points at all today. Of course, that's not true. Let's not jinx him. Alonso, he's doing pretty well at this point, currently running in P7. Jonathan Straitman, interesting question. Would it be doable to do a Kickstarter campaign to buy an F1 team? Well, we have seen crowdfunding used in Formula One before. Caterham were able to compete at Abu Dhabi in, I believe it was 2014, on crowdfunds. Of course, that was only good for one race. Could you put together a crowdfunding campaign to run a whole team for a whole season? That would be a lot of money. I suppose anything is possible if you have enough people interested and they put up enough money. Of course, you could do it, theoretically, but how do you convince millions of people? Of course, that's what you would need if everybody was just going to put up a modest sum. It'd be quite an undertaking, but theoretically, sure, anything's possible. Sky Sports here, just having a conversation about the Singapore Grand Prix and how long a race it is. Of course, to do 61 laps around here, it does take you right up to the 2-hour limit. Hamilton Radio. Hamilton just expressing some concerns about his rear tires. That's really not an actual concern. These tires will probably do another 6 Grand Prix distances before it's all said and done. Meanwhile, Perez trying to make his way around Sergei Sirotkin. Sirotkin is fighting back. This could end in tears. And it has! Perez has just crashed into Sergei Sirotkin. He's going to lose positions now to Sirotkin, to Nico Hülkenberg. That looked to be... I don't want to be passing judgment too soon, but that appeared to me that Sergio Perez intentionally turned in to Sergei Sirotkin while both cars were traveling in a straight line. We're going to see a replay of that surely, but to me that did appear that the Force India just turned in on the Williams before it absolutely needed to turn in to take a corner. Again, we need to see a replay of this. Perez making his way into the pit lane now. Meanwhile, Sergei Sirotkin now fighting with Nico Hülkenberg, trying to see what sorts of damages we have on the Williams. There does appear to be some, but Sirotkin's not letting it slow him down. He is fighting with Nico Hülkenberg now. He's unable to outbrake the German. But that's quite interesting to see from Sergio Perez. Again, that had the looks, I'm not trying to accuse anybody here, but that had the look of an intentional maneuver. Sirotkin, yes, that was our first good look at the right side of that Williams. The turning vane on the outer edge of the side pod is missing. There is a section of that turning vane which has also been folded upward toward the inside of the car, right outside the circumference of halo, so there are some loose pieces of Williams that are hanging on along for the ride right now. Of course, that'll be giving Sirotkin some turbulence down the straights, but in terms of losing cornering performance, maybe not. Let's take another look at this. Traveling in a straight line here. Perez turned in on Sirotkin. Perez just moved over to his left and crashed into Sirotkin. It appeared to be deliberate. There was no reason for Perez to move over to the left at that stage, yet he did. I'm going to say that was a deliberate attempt to crash out Sergei Sirotkin on the part of Sergio Perez. I don't think you're going to be able to prove otherwise there. Meanwhile, following Kevin Magnussen and Brendan Hartley going at it, this is for P17. Hartley has the position, Magnussen wants the position. Stewards are investigating that collision between Sirotkin and Perez. Again, I don't see how we could find anything other than a deliberate attempt by Perez to put Sirotkin into the wall, basically. Lewis Hamilton getting through the back markers now. Kevin Magnussen yielding to the Englishman, as you might expect. Blue flags, of course, are out in force for Lewis Hamilton. Meanwhile, Sergio Perez has rejoined the race. He is last in P19, but he is still running. Mercedes just talking to Hamilton there about his tire situation. They're saying the temperatures are consistent, but it is a little bit on the cold side, so the wear is going to be under control, but the grip could be a little low. Meanwhile, Romain Grosjean and Sergei Sirotkin going at it now. This is for P14. Sirotkin has it. Grosjean wants it. Sirotkin, remember, he is dealing with some damage on that Williams. He's starting to pull a train now behind him. And Lewis Hamilton is at the end of that train. He is, of course, putting everybody a lap down. Hamilton sliding his way up through these back markers now. Sirotkin with a big lockup there. Grosjean taking evasive action to go wide. That did not appear to be intentional on the part of Sirotkin. He's just dealing with a damaged car. Grosjean appears to be able to take that position away from the Russian, but they go side by side into the next bend. Yes, Grosjean definitely has that position now. Sirotkin having to yield to Lewis Hamilton. That is Max Verstappen now in this fight. Lewis Hamilton is mired in this traffic. Max Verstappen is now just 0.2 or so behind Lewis Hamilton. That is a disaster for Hamilton. Let's see what Max Verstappen can do here. The Haas of Romain Grosjean immediately in front of Lewis Hamilton on track. Of course, Grosjean is a lap down at this point. Grosjean allowing Hamilton through and attempting to allow Verstappen through. Verstappen just caught him up at just the wrong moment. Lewis Hamilton now scampers away from that pack. Verstappen makes it around Grosjean now. Yes, that mess all started with Sirotkin just locking up there again, still trying to compensate for the damage on his car. Hamilton radio. Incident involving Magnussen and Hartley under investigation. That's at turn 7. Yes, Lewis Hamilton once again has pulled away from that pack, as has Max Verstappen, but Hamilton is already 3 seconds in front of Verstappen yet again. Aiden, to answer your question, driver last name is currently in P18. He is followed in P19 by driver last name to the tune of 2.9 seconds adrift. Driver surname is out of the race after a turn 1 incident, and driver surname the second is currently leading. Sergio Perez has been given a drive-through penalty for his apparently deliberate contact with Sergei Sirotkin. I think that penalty is a bit too lenient. And here it is, once again, Sergio Perez and Sergei Sirotkin once again running right next to each other on track. Sirotkin in P16, Perez in P17. What will the Mexican do to the Russian this time? Perez pulling alongside Sirotkin. Behave. Don't do anything stupid here. Perez makes it around the Williams now. Of course, he's going to have a stop-go penalty here. That overtake Perez on Sirotkin, basically irrelevant. He is going to have to come in within 3 laps to serve that penalty. However, everybody's heart just goes into their mouths at this point. We're really going to need an explanation from Perez as to what he was thinking, because that was entirely unwarranted. No matter how you want to look at it, Perez now driving through the pit lane to serve his penalty. Working lap 41 of 61, 20 laps to go. We might not quite make it there in terms of time. We should at this rate. If a safety car comes in, though, who knows what's going to happen. Hamilton continuing to lead Max Verstappen by 3.3 seconds. Sebastian Vettel in third. Bottas fourth. Raikkonen in fifth. Ricciardo sixth. Alonso seventh. Ericsson in eighth. Ninth is Carlos Sainz, and 10th is Van Dorn. Charles Leclerc, new Ferrari driver for next year, in P11. On board with Carlos Sainz in pursuit of Marcus Ericsson ahead. We can see Sainz just making some differential adjustments there in the cockpit. Renault Garage, Alain Prost looking on, taking a look at the telemetry there, listening into the radio chatter. Cameras follow now from the outside, Marcus Ericsson and Carlos Sainz. Carlos Sainz, of course, going to McLaren next year. Marcus Ericsson, his future is up in the air. Will he be Kimi Raikkonen's teammate at Sauber next year, or will it be somebody like Antonio Giovinazzi? That remains to be seen, but it is an intriguing story. Turn 1 action, Kevin Magnussen and Brendan Hartley fighting over P17. Magnussen has it, Hartley wants it. Perez is behind both of them, about 13.5 seconds behind both of them after serving his drive-through penalty. No action at the front of the field. Hamilton continues to lead Verstappen by 3.6 seconds. 4.6 seconds is between Verstappen and Vettel, however, so no real intrigue for the podium finishing positions at this time. Hamilton and Verstappen running on the soft compound tires, Vettel running on the ultra softs. We're still waiting to see if Ferrari are going to have to pit one more time. Inside 20 laps to go as we are now. Perhaps Ferrari could just squeak it out, but who knows at this rate. No matter what, Ferrari's not going to be winning this race, Sebastian Vettel's not going to be winning this race, and the 2018 Drivers' Championship is already all but won by Lewis Hamilton. Sainz and Ericsson still going at it for P8. Ericsson has P8. Sainz coming around the outside of Marcus Ericsson now. Unable to convert that position. Sainz looking at Ericsson under braking again. Ericsson driving very smartly. He's just closing off Sainz whenever he needs to, but he's not making any abrupt maneuvers. He's not doing anything untoward in terms of abject blocking. Good racing here by both of these guys. Ericsson with a little bit of a lockup there into the tight left-hander coming down the Esplanade Boulevard there. Also, time penalty being announced for Romain Grosjean for some reason. Not entirely sure what that's about. Saying it's for ignoring blue flags. We'll see if that's true. Carlos Sainz going around the outside of Marcus Ericsson now, coming into Sector 3. Move done. Sainz now up into P8. Ericsson down into P9. The penalty there for Grosjean is complete BS. I mean, they're saying he held up Hamilton and Verstappen, which he did, but where was he supposed to go? You have 80 billion corners thrown into this lap, and they're all taken at 10 miles an hour. Where are you supposed to go? Meanwhile, Fernando Alonso, fastest lap of the race, 143.518, fastest of all in Sector 3. Marcus Ericsson finally makes his first pit stop. Fernando Alonso, of course, the 2019 IndyCar champion, setting the world alight here. Meanwhile, out on track, Perez in P18, Sirotkin in P19. They are running very close together again. That story's not quite over yet. Camera's now picking up Sebastian Vettel for the first time in the last 5 hours. Yeah, we don't see any action around here. Vettel is running all by himself. Verstappen is another... Dear... Verstappen is eons down the road from Sebastian Vettel. Lewis Hamilton is several eons down the road from Sebastian Vettel. Sebastian Vettel having his own race out here today. Sergei Sirotkin in the pit lane serving a 5-second penalty for forcing another driver off the track. Supposedly that happened with Brendan Hartley. I would argue that Sirotkin, after getting run into, has a little bit of post-traumatic stress and perhaps just had a little bit of an oversight there. On board with Brendan Hartley in replay. That's Sirotkin around him. Sirotkin's having his own incident there. He's struggling on the brakes as well. Here's the outside. Let's take a better look at that. Sirotkin's having his own accident already. That's just poor timing on the part of fate. Sirotkin did not do that intentionally. Meanwhile, at the sharp end of the field, Lewis Hamilton continues to lead Max Verstappen to the tune of 3.6 seconds. It's a further 6 seconds down the road to Sebastian Vettel, who is himself 6 seconds in front of Valtteri Bottas. The good news is we are coming down to within 10 laps to go, working lap 49 of 61, just 2 laps away now from the 10 to go. Detour, my mic is not push to talk. It does have a mute function on it, though, so if you're able to hear the click as I come on and off, that's what I'm doing there. I'm just muting it momentarily there. Daniel Ricciardo sets fastest lap of the race, 143.335. We're still 8 seconds off of pole position. On board with Kimi Räikkönen in P5. Radio. Ferrari telling Kimi to ignore the brake alarm. Evidently we have got up to some sort of red line value on brake temperatures or wear rates or both. Trying to see if I can read anything on Kimi's steering wheel. Not seeing anything. Then again, I'm not totally familiar with what Ferrari is showing their drivers on the steering wheel. I don't see any big red lights anywhere, though. Let's see. Sebastian Vettel, yeah, it does appear that he's just not pitting. We've now got 10 laps to go, so that means another 35 minutes, given the absolutely interminable lap times that we have here. And honestly, I know that we talk about the early 2000s being a bore fest in that Ferrari were winning everything, and to an extent that's true, but also look at the bigger picture. Look at how much healthier the sport was in the early 2000s, not even to mention before that. The teams were pulling in hundreds of millions of dollars a year in tobacco money, which meant that the cars could be developed year in and year out. Teams would bring new engines to every weekend. The drivers were able to push the cars to the limit. They were able to play with tire compounds as much as they wanted. And of course, development costs went sky high. But the sponsoring companies looked at Formula One as a worthy investment from an advertising standpoint. And it worked. And it created a sport that was very vibrant. It created a sport that had many storylines, technically speaking, as well as on the driver front, on the political front, in terms of what the teams are doing design-wise. It created a spectacle that was really, obviously, it's a legendary thing. We're still talking about it. Nowadays, the tobacco money is gone for no reason other than politics, so the teams are left trying to pull together shoestring budgets unless you are a big manufacturer like Ferrari or Mercedes, who can still throw hundreds of millions of dollars at their cars year in and year out. So the development race is mostly gone as far as engines and drivelines are concerned. Everything has more or less evened out in terms of aerodynamic performance. These cars, they have basically extracted the maximum potential of topside aero. That's why they can't follow closely through high-speed corners. There is no storyline at all in terms of engines. They sound like broken vacuum cleaners. They're producing tons of horsepower, but they're absolutely horrible to watch. And we have tracks like Singapore where overtaking's impossible. So we might be able to say that F1 fans are blinded by nostalgia, but at the same time, the product that we had 20 years ago was fundamentally better. Kevin Magnussen in P18 just sets fastest lap of the race, 141.905. You know that we have got a problem when the driver running in 18th is the fastest car on the track, and the driver leading the race is 2 seconds a lap slower. Basically, the tobacco sponsors went away from Formula One for two reasons. One, the European Union, as it slowly started to acquire more of an iron-fisted grasp across all of the perfectly sovereign states in Europe, they said, well, we're not going to allow tobacco advertising of any kind on any platform. This includes live televised sporting events. So, this all came to a head in 2005 at the Hungarian Grand Prix, where we had several teams still running tobacco sponsorship at the time, and they basically showed up with two sets of bodywork, one with and one without tobacco sponsorship, because it wasn't clear if the regulations in Hungary that allowed the tobacco advertising, it wasn't clear if the images from the TV cameras could be broadcast into EU countries who had just adopted new anti-tobacco legislation. So we had teams running with and without tobacco sponsorship at different points during the Hungarian Grand Prix weekend in '05. The reason why that even happened? Social engineering. Nobody's telling you you have to smoke. Just because you see Marlboro on the side of a Ferrari or you saw Mild 7 on the side of a Renault, that doesn't mean that you have to smoke. It just means that there's a company out there who wants to advertise on a race car. So be it. But no, we have to have the nanny state involved in telling us what's good for us. No, Aiden, in 2005 there was new EU legislation that specifically concerned the broadcast of tobacco imagery from sporting events. Yes, they got that crazy about it. I remember it. We have the same thing here in the United States. You're not even allowed to talk about cigarettes without saying that this product is known to the state of California to cause cancer. Like, we know it's not good for you, but I don't have any right to make any decisions for you. Same thing here. I hate it when politicians and governing organizations get together to tell us how to live our lives. Leave us alone. Working lap 55 of 61. You know the race sucks when we're talking about politics. Cameras have picked up Daniel Ricciardo in P6. He's done nothing all day. Lewis Hamilton has also done nothing all day. He's just happened to have done nothing in front of everybody else who is doing nothing. The top three positions are unchanged from the start. We could have ended this race on lap 1 and gotten exactly the same result as we have now. The only car out of the race is Esteban Ocon after he was punted by Sergio Perez, who has since punted into a couple of other people, earning himself a drive-through penalty and perhaps some penalty points on his super license at the end of this. Basically, the 2018 Singapore Grand Prix has been an absolutely irrelevant affair, except for the fact that the Drivers' Championship is now all but over. That Empire guy, yes, exactly. We can have alcohol sponsors everywhere, but tobacco? No, you can't have tobacco, even though I have never heard of a single case of somebody getting into a car accident because they were mentally impaired from smoking tobacco. I've heard a lot of that from alcohol, though. The only action we've seen in this race was incidental contact between teammates on lap 1, back markers bunching up P1 and P2, and Perez intentionally crashing into Sorokin. That is literally the only action we've seen today. 3 moments, totaling less than 10 seconds each. For those of you so inclined, Driver of the Day voting is now open at Formula1.com/vote. I agree with hesitated eye. Sergio Perez is getting Driver of the Day from me. Yes, getting into the tobacco and alcohol sponsorship once again. There are different rules in different countries that are governing what exactly you can and cannot put on your car. France has some interesting rules about that, considering they do smoke and drink more than any other European country. It's all politics, though, because when you think about all of the legal drugs that we do have in our society, by far the most destructive of those is alcohol. Alcohol causes more deaths, it causes more violence, it causes more car accidents, you name it, alcohol is a factor in all of these things. Tobacco and nicotine acts on the body in a very similar way as caffeine does. And caffeine, obviously, another legal substance, and we all consume it on a daily basis in some form or another. Alcohol, obviously, it is a far more destructive, or it has the potential to be far more destructive than something like nicotine, yet nicotine gets all of the stigma and alcohol just continues to skate by. I don't understand it. Working lap 58 of 61, 3 laps to go. Lewis Hamilton continues to lead the field by 6.8 seconds over Max Verstappen. The camera's picking up Valtteri Bottas and Kimi Räikkönen. This is a fight for P4. Räikkönen does not appear to be invested in it. Räikkönen seems content in 5th. Yes, Aiden, I expect to see a video that says how F1 quit smoking in the title. That'll be an interesting one for sure. I do love those story time segments that you put up. I learn a lot from them. The cameras now are just voraciously consuming every frame of Valtteri Bottas and Kimi Räikkönen out here, as if something's going to happen. Räikkönen is not attacking Bottas. The cameras are zooming in on him as if he is, but there's nothing happening here. Christian Gaitan, yes, I am going to review more 1/18th scale cars. There is actually another review coming rather soon. Two laps to go. 61 laps scheduled, working lap 60, currently 1 hour 48 minutes into the Singapore Grand Prix. Yes, I have to say, Aiden, the Ferrari does look very good under the lights. In fact, most of the cars look pretty good under the lights, if we can ignore Halo for a moment. Yes, more shots fired, but again, running at night is one thing, and I think it is good for the show. But running at night at a place like this, you could run the Singapore Grand Prix in the daytime and you'd have the same result. The track just doesn't allow for these guys to get runs on each other. It doesn't allow for overtaking. The corners are all far too slow and far too tight. Nathan, you make a good point about Formula One needing to appeal to a larger audience. Problem is, Formula One is not appealing to a larger audience. If anything, they have put out the air of being more exclusive, more restrictive, more expensive as well. I don't see so many just normal-looking people at a Grand Prix. I see celebrities everywhere. I see Ferrari, again, from the top of the show here today, I see Ferrari spending who knows how much money on a little bit of theater to put a snorkel on top of the snorkel to cover the onboard camera so that they can't see the steering wheel settings. I mean, I just see a world of complete excess here, and I don't see that excess going into making the racing better. I see the excess going into creating a designer brand. I see that excess going into creating this idea that Formula One is for the rich and powerful, but not for the common man. And I see the racing getting worse because of it. I look over stateside at IndyCar, I see the racing getting better, and I see the atmosphere at the track getting better. I see ticket prices going down, and I see access only increasing. Meanwhile, the world feed picking up Lewis Hamilton as he's running through the end of Sector 3. Max Verstappen is 8.8 seconds down the road. Hamilton just turning left now underneath the grandstand. Remember in 2008 when this track debuted, that was the storyline corner. Coming through the last couple of complexes, that final chicane before we get into the double apex left-hander to end the lap. Lewis Hamilton picks up a perfect apex. He exits, he pulls into the inside of the track to salute his Mercedes team as he crosses the line to win the 2018 Singapore Grand Prix. Max Verstappen finishes in second. Sebastian Vettel is a long way down the road. However, it does look that Sebastian Vettel will pick up third place, the final podium position. Camera's now picking up Sebastian Vettel as he's just exited the grandstand turn, coming down through the last chicane. One more corner to go for the Ferrari man. He turns in. The light glistens off the absolutely resplendent red paintwork on the SF71H. Sebastian Vettel finishes in P3. And I've just realized something here. You saw the fireworks that were launched as the top three crossed the line. They have barges out in the harbor launching aerial shells. Does this mean that Formula One spent $1 million on fireworks for this race? It could well do. Those are the things that I'm talking about. It just puts out the air of excess and exclusivity and expense, and it's just not what the fans really want. For the record, Lewis Hamilton wins the Singapore Grand Prix by 8.961 seconds over Max Verstappen. Where the times really matter, Lewis Hamilton to Sebastian Vettel. The gap at the line was 39.945 seconds. So our championship rivals here separated by 39 seconds. I want all of you right now, legitimately, to give me an argument as to why that is a compelling story for a championship fight, when one guy is beating the other by 39 seconds, and it's a consistent thing. It looks like Hamilton has parked his car on top of a very large flat panel screen of some sort. Again, how much does that cost, and how much of that money could have been given back to the team so that they could build better engines? I don't know. David Coulthard standing by to talk with Lewis Hamilton here. Lewis just recounting that sequence there behind Romain Grosjean, trying to lap him, and Verstappen getting close by, getting in and amongst the back markers. But, of course, Hamilton was able to keep everything under control. Restriction X, you missed the race, but you didn't miss anything. The top 3 finishers are exactly the same as their qualifying order. Max Verstappen had some sort of electronics gremlin there concerning the gearbox for most of the race, it does seem. Some gear selection issues, but of course, still managing to finish second. Here is Sebastian Vettel, our third place and final podium place finisher. Listen to Sebastian Vettel here. He looks and sounds like an utterly beaten man. There's no fire in his belly at all. Martin Brundle there, just talking about the record book. Michael Schumacher's records coming to mind here. Lewis Hamilton, this was victory number 69 for him, something like that. Michael Schumacher, of course, has 91 Grand Prix victories to his name and 7 World Championships. Lewis Hamilton this year looks set to win his 5th World Championship. The only other drivers ever to do that, Juan Manuel Fangio and Michael Schumacher. So Hamilton is about to join a very exclusive club. In the prep room here before the podium, drivers don't seem to be particularly animated. Everybody just seems wiped out. JT plays. I would beg to differ with you a little bit on that. Michael Schumacher, particularly in his early spell with Ferrari, 1996 through 1998 or so. 1996, he was winning races with a car that Eddie Irvine, his teammate, couldn't get on the podium with. So Michael Schumacher did not always have the best car. 97, he was in the championship fight right to the final round, and he probably was going to win that championship if he just kept his head together. Again, the Ferrari F310B, not the best car in the world. Certainly couldn't hold a candle to the Williams FW19. Michael Schumacher was doing his bidding in cars that had no business going where he was taking them. Ayrton Senna, remember, yes, of course, he did win his championships in good cars, but look at Donington 1993 with the McLaren Ford. That car was atrocious, and he won that race driving on slicks in the wet on occasion, winning, of course, the Australian Grand Prix in 1993 in the same car. And, of course, that Williams in 1994 taking pole at Imola, that Williams was a terrible car as well. So the idea that Senna had good cars for his entire career is also very misguided. Podium ceremony here getting wrapped up. Deputy Prime Minister of Singapore handing out the winner's trophy to Lewis Hamilton. Norman Robinson, is Lewis Hamilton going to go for 7 world championships? Well, if Mercedes continues on this form, I see no reason why Lewis Hamilton would want to stop racing, so it's entirely possible that Lewis could win 7 or maybe even 8 world championships. Again, it all depends on how Mercedes adapts to regulation changes in the future going into next year with different aero regs, and for 2020 and 2021 we could have a very different looking Formula One in its totality. But if Mercedes stay on form, Lewis Hamilton is going to have no reason to stop unless he simply wants to stop, and at that point he could well be a 7- or 8-time world champion. At this point, all of the post-race coverage going to get underway. There's George Russell there sitting in the main grandstand with everybody else. That doesn't make sense. At this point, though, I will leave all of you to digest this race for yourselves. Our next Grand Prix is going to be coming to us from Russia, the weekend of the 28th through 30th. Russian Grand Prix, of course, moving later on in the season than it has been in previous iterations. It's basically covering the slot that's been vacated by Malaysia, but Russia is the next Grand Prix, and we will see you from there next time out. Until next time, though, Ferrariman601 saying thank you all very much for joining me today, and of course, we will see you soon.